The Union Street.
And
It's landlocked.
oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've seen
But
that one
this-
many times.
big vernal pools but they're
We
not
used, when the kids were little, we
noted,
we ice skate down there all the.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, so
Still say recording?
it still says
Very good. First up, roll call. We're not gonna bother with that. Acceptance of the agenda, we're good. Approval of the minutes, no minutes. Public comment period. Anybody there to comment, Isabel?
no members of the public, no.
All right, then we'll jump right in. New business. Tonight, we're talking about just a continuation of discussion we had last time. Isabel, I believe you have some proposed language you want to throw in front of us and then kind of help chart the path forward. So I think it's up to you if you want to review what we're going over this evening.
Sure. So last meeting, I think most of you were here, but we presented the draft future land use section of the plan. In general, we sort of worked through some comments during the meeting. The big one that I was tasked to come back, and he just walked in, the taskmaster himself. Judd had asked me to come back with some research on the MDR density increase, I guess is what we could call it. So we had talked a lot about matching historic development patterns in the existing MDR zoning district, encouraging infill development within our already developed area, and sort of continuing to discourage development in our sort of more rural areas of the community. And I had sort of thrown out two different options at our last meeting. One being increasing the density allowances in the MDR zoning district in order to encourage, duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, or limited splitting of lots where that was possible. Judd had asked me to do some research and some analysis on how many properties would actually be impacted by the proposed change. So I did include that in your meeting packet. I did some analysis on GIS. Frankly, there's a lot of large parcels that are sort of skewing this information in the MDR zoning district, because I think the question was more about how does this impact existing neighborhoods, and not necessarily those parcels sort of more far flung out, or the golf course parcel, I think, is also in there, technically in the MDR, although obviously not being used as residential. So anyway, this all being said, I did some analysis that was included in the packet. I tried to separate this out by how many units you could feasibly get on existing parcels. So I will share my screen. The visual is not super helpful until you get into some of the 5+ unit developments, and then it really starts to limit the areas where that can be done. But yes. And it actually might be a little bit small anyway. Okay. Maybe I'll just talk through this instead. So what you're seeing here is sort of, it's segmented out between what would be allowed under our current zoning on the left, and then on the right, what would be where 2 units would be allowed under the proposed change. So you had asked, does this impact 10, 20, 100 parcels? For 2 units, it would end up allowing about 150 additional parcels to be split into 2 units than what would currently be allowed under our current zoning.
Could you, I'm having trouble understanding that graphic.
Yeah.
On the left, the darker spots are what? The current parcels?
So everything that you're seeing here are current parcels. Right. What the difference is, and they are pretty much the same, because it really only impacts the smaller lots at this level. What you're seeing on the left is the number of parcels, and that's the highlighted blue parcels that could be currently split into either 2 lots or 2 buildings under our current zoning.
Right.
And then the one on the right, and it is pretty much the same with the addition of some parcels where my cursor is, well, you can't really see that, but over near the university campus is the biggest area of change here. And that, what you're seeing on the right is the number of parcels that could be split under the density increase that's proposed. So
And that's 10,000, is it 10,000 square feet?
10,000, yeah. And it's the difference of, you know, a little bit less than 200 parcels for 2 units. And then it starts to really change when we get into the larger unit counts. So as you'll note, there are many large parcels in our current MDR zoning district. Those could be split currently, but they would have to meet 15,000 square foot minimum lot area requirements. We are proposing that 10,000 square feet. And so this graphic on the right is showing that 362 out of the 1,014 parcels could be split into 3 units under that, or 3 parcels, depending on how you cut them, under the proposed change. And then 250 are able to do that by right under our current ordinance now. And then for 4 units or 4 different lots, 190 of the 1,014 parcels are able to do that by right now. If we changed the density requirement to 10,000 square feet per dwelling unit, 282 parcels would be able to do that.
But really, it's the difference that we care about.
Yes,
It's really, so it's the 92 that we care about,
yeah,
which is roughly 10% of the parcels.
And that's based on size of the lot, not like, you know, some of those might have a house smack dab in the center of that.
right.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't get into that level
Right,
of detail.
right.
Yeah, so this is purely based on lot size that currently exists. Yeah.
Are there some rules about putting like an in-law apartment on these houses? Like some of these that have a lot of space, can they put an in-law?
Yeah, so I was thinking about talking about this in the memo, but I think it makes more sense to just talk about it out loud. So as you might know, the state adopted LD 2003, which among other things eliminated single family only zoning across the state. Anywhere that a single family home is allowed, an accessory dwelling unit or a in-law apartment is now also allowed.
Okay,
You can put some caveats around like how big an in-law apartment can be, and it still needs to meet setback requirements, but it is allowed by right. No planning board approval anywhere that a single family home is allowed.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was the state law change.
In an in-law apartment, you can have full bath, kitchen, the whole works.
Yes, yep.
What do our current rules say about the accessory dwelling unit? It's square footage. It's that there's a maximum size, I think.
I'm just gonna pull it up because there's a couple of things.
100 feet or something.
Okay, so the accessory dwelling unit, in-law apartment, granny flat has a number of names, but we call them ADUs or accessory dwelling units in our ordinance. They can't exceed 500 square feet, limited to need more than 1 bedroom, limited to not more than 2 occupants, and then no parking is required. And I should say the parking is a state law requirement. You can't allow it, you can't require additional parking for ADUs.
Under the state law, the new state law, we can make those restrictions as a municipality.
Yes, the existing restrictions that we have are A-OK, and they were passed after that state law. Yeah. I'll just give you an overview tonight. My goal is really that we come out of this meeting with a future land use plan draft that you would be comfortable with me sharing with the public. Doesn't have to be a final draft. We can ask questions of the public at our workshop, but I need something that you all would feel comfortable with me bringing to a workshop and presenting to the public. And so to me, reviewing my notes from our last meeting, the MDR conversation was really the biggest one that we had left. So that's why I'm bringing that to your attention. And if it feels like a non-starter, I want to know that, or if you're comfortable with that based on the analysis provided, we can move forward.
I have a question. So obviously we have many units that qualify for subdivision or division
Mhm.
of the property as it is. How often does this actually happen? Like how many times a year? Half a decade?
So I will say, I and the planning board don't review duplexes, and we now no longer have to review accessory dwelling units. So I don't have a count on those numbers specifically. I can tell you that we only have like 9 or 10 permitted accessory dwelling units in the whole community. So that part is not a lot. And then in terms of the actual division of lots, it doesn't frequently come past my desk, so I would have to do more. Get more information to answer that better.
It sounds like the number's not high.
I don't think the number is very high.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say I frequently get inquiries. And I get inquiries about a lot of things. Some of them go somewhere, some of them don't. In this case, unfortunately, it's a non-starter for most people, because of the density and frontage requirements are the main issues that they're running into.
What about deed restrictions? Does that have any insights into where parcels have deed restrictions in them where people can't subdivide?
I would have to do a lot of analysis to get that piece. Because I would have to actually,
Yeah.
the town doesn't keep any record of that.
Yeah.
So we would have to go through and,
But the state law changes didn't do anything to
No.
undermine those kinds of things. I guess.
right, so like local ordinance, state law doesn't undermine any of that. If you have like an HOA or deed restrictions, that is the prevailing document.
So our intent here is to allow more houses to be created at a higher density in the MDR. The intent is not to have more 4 units created in neighborhoods.
Well,
That's a question.
yeah, I think in general, the intent is to allow more housing in the area that's already developed, so yeah, MDR. And related to sort of, again, to better match our historic development patterns, that was 8,000 and 9,000 square feet. So there was a change at some point to up the MDR to 15,000, or actually to 20,000, then we only recently, within the past 10 years, dropped that down to 15,000 square feet for lots on sewer and water. The intent here is, yeah, really to create housing in existing neighborhoods, create more housing that's walkable, amenity rich, et cetera, and discourage development
On the outskirts.
in the outskirts, yeah.
Ashley mentioned there's a lot of the lots have a house right dead center. What would keep me from buying that property, tearing down that house and building 2 houses on it?
Occasionally that does happen. In other communities I've worked in, that was sort of the driver of the creation of new housing. That could be something that feasibly happens, if it makes financial sense for folks. The biggest piece that I can say here is all of this, we can do these regulatory levers and try to do what we can. If it doesn't make financial sense to do what you're suggesting, it's not gonna happen. So there's that caveat as well.
I'll give you a list of abandoned houses that could be.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I know it happens in Old Town all the time. There's several houses that just can't be done anything
Yeah.
but demolish it.
2 new units would be a good addition.
There's abandoned houses in Orono?
What's that?
There's abandoned houses in Orono?
It sure looks like there are a few that are not down in like, a few down in the basin and things like that are look like they're uninhabited. They got the X's on them and the.
Judd, I don't recall the last time why, we went from 20 to 15 with it. Was that a comp plan related change? Dropping that
I-
down to-
It was all around trying to, get people to build
Yeah.
housing. I mean, the only concern I have at all is the houses it makes converting an existing house into a 3 and 4 unit much more economically. You know, I'm just sitting here thinking, man, I could turn my house into a 4 unit now.
So,
And that becomes somewhat lucrative, right? If I can have 8 bedrooms and I'm renting those out for $500-600 a bedroom, and all of a sudden I'm making some money there. Now I'm getting $4 or $5 grand a month, which supports, you know, paying $800 grand, $900 grand for a house or a structure or whatever. So it changes the economics. I don't know if there's a way to push creating this housing, but mitigate the risks of 3 and 4 units popping up in these neighborhoods. Because there are, you know, now there'd be almost a quarter of our stock could be turned into a 4 unit.
so I'm glad you're bringing this up because this was something I wanted to talk about this evening as well. Our current ordinance, when we had to adopt these changes to match LD 2003, they didn't change the fact that multifamily dwellings, so 3+ units as a use, is still not an allowed use in the MDR zoning district. So when you look at what I did is in terms of the analysis, I think anything more than a 2 unit, I started to make notes that under our existing ordinance, you would either need to do like 2 buildings, so like a single family home and then a duplex to get a 3 unit, or like 2 duplexes, because a duplex is allowed, a single family home is allowed, but multifamily dwellings as a use
A
is
3
not
and 4
allowed.
unit or not. Okay,
Right.
so we're mitigated, problem mitigated.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to bring up, and if this is the way we decide to go, I think this is a satisfactory solution to getting more housing in these areas while still, I think, meeting the goals that we're talking about. It seems like, you know, not having 3 and 4 unit buildings. I do just want to bring up that one of the things that I talk about in communities that I'm working with is sort of efficiency of development. And to me, and this is my personal opinion, Isabel opinion, not like town planner opinion. To me, a 3 and 4 unit building that sort of looks like a single family home, but maybe has 2 doors on the front, is certainly the more efficient development pattern. Or even more efficient, the conversion of existing single family homes to 3 and 4 unit buildings is certainly the more efficient and economical development pattern, rather than building like a duplex and a single family home or 2 duplexes on 1 lot. So I want to bring that up for your consideration. But if it seems like you're happy with the existing ordinance as it stands, I think even what we're proposing with the lowering the density requirement, or upping the density, lowering the minimum lot area requirement, starts to get at our goal. But just want to bring it up for the purposes of conversation.
Yeah, what do people think about that? I mean, that's one of our goals, reducing lot size in MDR, but Judd, is that, you know, her presentation, does that answer your questions that you had from before?
It does, yeah. I mean, the only open question is I mean, to me, this makes sense, given the mitigation. I'd probably defer to council if they feel like student housing in the midst of, you know, neighborhoods is still a problem. I mean, it was a problem. There was a lot of vocalness around it in the previous meetings. Maybe it's not a problem now. Maybe, as you're saying, we can have these 3 and 4 unit structures in these neighborhoods.
Well, some of this is, you know, to consider in our residential neighborhoods. If we're gonna, again, do this, it might encourage more students. And we're just coming off of that incident in my neighborhood where, you know, students in the neighborhood ended up beating up one of my neighbors. So, yeah, and we got to be careful with this decision. But
Yeah, again, probably not a time to push for students integrated. But again, I'm not opposed.
We want good behaviors in our residential neighborhoods, right? And people to be good neighbors, and that's something Orono's dealt with for a long time. And we had a meeting in this room at 9 o'clock on Monday for an hour and a half talking about the good neighbor, you know, initiative, and how we clearly establish kind of what our, you know, short term, you know, work we'll do to be ready for the fall, to, you know, better establish our expectations and communicate what it means to be a good neighbor among everybody. It doesn't matter what age you are, but you know, you can't have a nightclub in the Webster neighborhood. You know, you just can't have 100 people at 12:30 at night without anyone checking IDs or anyone checking for alcohol intoxication and things like that, and just expel people into the neighborhood and expect anything but bad things to happen. So those are kind of behaviors we're gonna take on, so. And I don't know that, I think there's a lot of pathways to housing that works for people in our residential neighborhoods. I don't know if the 4-unit conversions are what people want to live next to, who, you know, bought a single family residence, and I don't think it's probably not aligned with what they were hoping for when they moved into one of our residential neighborhoods. So that would be a harder sell. I like and I don't know how far you get. I apologize. Rob and I I'm taking over for Rob, so you kind of got downgraded, but I'm going to be the council representative to your meetings from now on. Rob had a kind of existing conflict, and so I apologize. I haven't been at all the meetings to follow all the conversations, but.
What happened to, there was a development that was going in off of Main Street. They ran into opposition from neighbors, and there were vernal pools, and there were so many things that never got happened. And I think that was supposed to be a row of duplexes up and through there.
I think you're talking Black Bear Heights.
Yeah, I think
no, there was
was
a
called-
two-phase development, and both phases to make the economics work. I think you needed both phases, and the vernal pool issue really impacted the backside, if I remember correctly. So it just wasn't economically feasible for the developer at the time. But that's what some of that precipitated all the kind of the novel discussions about vernal pool, you know, assessment, and you know, the Orono, the pilot project at Orono, and I can't remember the other town, but that we, you know, that Evan Rickard, I think he shepherded that effort through. But yeah, I think now, I don't know whether, and Isabel, you might know, or you know, if there's been inquiries, but I think with that innovation, the vernal pool assessment, and like preserving vernal pools that are more higher value elsewhere, whether now that project could be viable now, I don't know that. Do you recall?
It could be viable with the program. I will say that it was recently bought by somebody who is intending to use the property as he built a house on it, sort of smack in the middle. It's a single family home. Yeah, he's intending to just use it as his property, so.
Well, that was just a wonderful idea in theory, because again, it connected dead-end streets. There was paths to the school. There's just a lot of benefits, but the impacts just shut the project down. So
yeah,
it's one less opportunity for us now.
I would see this as a good area to get some more feedback from the community. And I guess I would, I don't know. I mean, I guess, do you lean towards making the 3 and 4 bedrooms more available or more able to be built or not? I am really honestly on the fence about it. But maybe we need to go one way or the other and then get more feedback.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah.
You guys are probably used to this by now, but I'm always for more housing. And I'm definitely for a more efficient, environmentally friendly use of existing resources. So my preference would always be to put more housing if we can, especially in the medium density area, where people can walk to things. And if you're using existing housing stock, then, you know, you're not doing a new build with new concrete, new timber. So that's kind of always my personal preference. I understand why people might not want that in their backyard, but we have to think, I don't know, I always think about like, what do I want the town to look like long term, right? So if I'm here when I'm 80 do I want to have more housing and a more vibrant community or less? And my personal preference is always to encourage more.
Is there a way, Isabel, to, we could just put some limitations, so reduce the lot size to allow more units, but yet maybe not the extremes, the 4 and 5 unit that would, perhaps seriously change a neighborhood dynamic?
Yeah, so am I hearing that you're generally comfortable with maybe like a 3 unit, like a triple decker, that
Yeah.
kind of a, but
Just,
maybe
if we limit extremes so that, yes, we're allowed more housing, it allows people with larger lots more flexibility to do what they want, we get more housing, but yet, sorry, Judd, your economics there of, 20 units in a single family, but, either way, so you might limit the extremes so that it'd be more palatable for neighbors, but I don't know that. Again, that's where the suggestion, Catherine's suggestion, we get more public input. I think that'd be a good idea. Because people are gonna need to weigh in on that issue. I don't want this committee to be necessarily the decider. We're kind of steering, one direction, but, it'd be nice to have more input.
When you said that, Isabel, that triple decker, it made me, I used to live in Medford, Mass, and it was families. I mean, there were some of us that were young, but that were living in the triple deckers, but it's like kind of culturally not how Maine is, because we don't have big cities, but that, you very much could have a family living in a 3 unit, or multiple families living in a 3 unit, but it's not what we, just, are there things that can make it less, more families living and less sort of transient people coming in and out living? I don't know, but the 3 sits well with me in general.
I thought this meeting was tomorrow, and so I'm not. But I guess I'm having trouble having this conversation without looking at a map, and my laptop is dead, so I'm trying to do it on my phone, and it's not clear to me. We're not looking at a map, and we're trying to make geographic decisions. So
We had a map just before you arrived. Isabel was reviewing those. Isabel, you want to flash them back up? Yeah, great.
it might be easier, okay, to show it this way. So what we're really talking about are the existing MDR zoning district, which is essentially all of the yellow, the lighter yellow, and this is Webster side that you're seeing on this map. So this is the future land use map that was presented last time. This is really just to answer Judd's question around when we're thinking about what to do with the existing MDR or in-town neighborhoods growth area, are we looking, what level of density are we looking at? So the yellow is the area that we're talking about.
not the Webster neighborhood, yellow.
The Webster
other
neighborhood,
yellow?
the Webster neighborhood is also lumped into this, but it's actually at a smaller minimum lot size, because that was the historic development pattern of that area, was more like 8,000 to 9,000 square feet.
And so how was that yellow area defined? Who decided this is all going to be yellow?
So the yellow area matches our existing MDR zoning district boundaries, including all of our existing sort of in-town developed neighborhoods. So this only matches our current MDR boundaries. I will say the map that you're seeing here, included in the future land use map, is not a regulatory map. So if we went through a zoning update and we wanted to change the boundaries of this loosely, that is certainly something that we would be allowed to do.
But it's been this way for a long time.
Well,
So if you were to change these, you'd be changing someone's property's zoning, which would have implications, right? These boundaries have existed a long time.
Right, but we're talking about changing them right now.
The density, so we
Yeah.
changed the rules within that zone, but we wouldn't be changing what zone a house is within. Right, so you wouldn't be
Yeah,
changing.
but the density of a zone speaks to what zone it's in too, right?
Yep, yep.
So,
definitely changed.
we're changing the zoning. area in effect, or saying that it needs to, because comp plans aren't necessarily implemented either though. So that's part of this also.
Right.
So. Okay.
So does that mean the property that's for sale that was Penobscot Auto, say, right by the farm down there? If somebody bought it and wanted to put in housing development, they could put in more houses with the
Exactly,
lower,
exactly.
okay, which
two
might
times-
make it more feasible for them.
Exactly.
That's a brownfield though, right?
What's Penobscot Auto? I don't.
Well, Silvers, it was right before Silvers.
It's a
They
big
had-
tractor
They
place
tore
now.
it down and
Yeah.
that land's for sale. There's a big aquifer and right by the road.
I'd assume because of its past use though, it's a brownfield anyway, so it would require significant mitigation to do real amounts
Probably.
of building
They
there.
weren't as bad as Silvers, but
What is are there family definitions that could apply to if you did go to the 3 or 4 unit buildings? There's nothing that could be applied.
So this is sort of the, this is the hard part.
Yeah.
You can't regulate students.
Yeah.
That's like age is a protected class.
Right.
So we couldn't regulate students. We couldn't, the term student housing, we couldn't regulate
Right.
something like that. We can't regulate like young professional or family housing. It's all the same, right? Under the Fair Housing Act. So we can't call something student housing versus like non-student rental housing. We also aren't able to regulate between or distinguish between rental housing and ownership housing.
In terms of like owner occupied.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, as a whole, I mean, you can do it in some limited ways, but as a whole, you're not able to distinguish between that.
So don't we have a definition of, we don't have a definition in our ordinance now?
We have a definition of like dormitory, and like that kind of student housing, which is sort of different. But if the two housing is functionally the same, you can't distinguish between like what age group can live there. Actually, I will say except for senior housing, which it's protected differently.
Not fair.
We do define student homes in our code though.
Yeah, so that would be something more like a dormitory or like on campus housing. Yep.
Okay.
Why do we have? So I've been here for 40-something years. And I know 30 years ago, there was hue and cry about dividing up houses into multiple apartments.
Mhm.
And it led to a lot of bad things happening. And it took us 20 years to kind of get out of that because we prohibited it. That didn't happen anymore. A lot of them were grandfathered. But I think the reaction of most people in the MDR zone is they're gonna go nuts when they hear this, that we're gonna allow, or we're contemplating allowing a 4-unit apartment building in the middle of their neighborhood. And they're gonna go bullshit.
If we want feedback, that's what we should recommend,
Okay,
because then we will get
okay.
You'll get people here, yeah.
So kind of, put, it seems like that may be the nuclear solution, put the 4 units, then let people tell us no.
It's called rage bait, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just-
Problem here with mixing these kinds of occupancies in the neighborhoods is one landlord is fine and he takes care of his property and he doesn't put up with crap from his tenants. But a lot of landlords, they don't care. And the place looks like hell and the students don't care. They're there for 9 months. They don't really care what it looks like. And it becomes a real, it lowers people's property values, I think it does. It's much harder to sell your home when if it's next to a 4-unit that's empty all summer long and fills up in late August. And I mean, it's not a good mix.
okay.
I don't understand why if we would propose the 4-unit just to get a reaction out of people. I mean,
Good stuff.
That's a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
so that maybe they'll be happy with 3, because I could take that theoretically, but if it's just, you know, is it to start a conversation, or is it to
I think it's gonna end the
understand what
con.
people want?
This whole yellow area though isn't on public water and sewer.
No.
The vast majority of it is, but you're right, like, once you get on to Kelly Road and once you get onto the VZ line of Main Street, it's not.
Like, I'm struggling with this entire vast area. We're just like, it's all one color. Because like,
That's the way it is.
there are different things going on, there are different factors and things going on in like, that's like 90% of the town. And so, I guess I guess I thought we would do some more in-depth kind of parceling or thinking about different areas.
I think I mean, I'm open to having that conversation about, if it seems like that's about the MDR specifically, and I'm open to having that conversation. I think it's not my recommendation for Orono because of sort of the points that have been made around like the existing zoning. And we can play with the density requirements while still acknowledging the different contexts as they do in our current ordinance, where we have sort of 2 different tiers of minimum lot area based on whether or not you're connected to water and sewer. That seems to be more in line with what has historically been the practice for this zoning district. And so I think I guess I'll say is I'm open to pushing people's comfort at boundaries, but I guess I need some more like conversation around what you wanted, what folks would want to see done.
I guess I'm also a little confused about why we went from the idea of making smaller lot sizes allowable to a 4-unit. The parcel next door to me. I don't understand that leap.
That's how it's written. This is about unit density. And we're saying now you can have a unit per 10,000 square feet of property. And so if you have an acre, you've got 45,000 square feet of property, so you can have 4 units. That's how all the ordinance is written.
But what Isabel was saying
I
is
was
that
thinking of it more of when you subdivide a larger parcel, you get more lots and more units by having smaller parcels.
Which there is mitigation. She said, today you said an MDR, you can only actually have a 2-unit building. So in an acre, you could have two units. But it's unlikely someone would buy a house on an acre lot. That's less likely than I'm gonna buy this existing structure and I'm gonna convert it into a 4-unit, which is generally a lot cheaper than I'm gonna tear this house down and build 2 units.
Well, and you could put ADUs on each of those units too, right?
Not each of them, you can only do 1 ADU per lot.
So it'd be
But
5.
that's if you
You'd
don't
buy.
subdivide the lot.
Right. So if you do what you're suggesting of, if I have a 1 acre lot and then it's 1 acre and it's kind of a long lot with a bunch of frontage, and I do 4 lots, you could theoretically have 1 dwelling or X dwelling units and an ADU.
So then you'd have 8 units. Cause you could have 4 single-family homes and then an accessory unit, which is probably kind of okay, but then you're. Right, I mean,
If you have the front, like in that sense, if you have the frontage, it kind of looks like the historic development pattern anyway.
right,
Along the street.
right.
If we're talking about building a 4-unit on a 1 acre of land, it doesn't feel like your neighbors are right up in your business. I mean, it feels like there's gotta be some space there with an acre of land. It doesn't really make, I mean, I think of it as like in the more dense parts of it being more of a concern, but maybe I'm wrong. the more
Yeah, I mean-
dense part of the MDR that people have more concerns about. Like in my neighborhood where there would be, you couldn't do it anyways because postage stamp lots.
Aren't most of our lots really long and skinny,
Um,
200 feet frontage?
Not necessarily, no. It might be helpful to actually look at like the parcel map for this area.
I mean, what argues against that is 282 of the 1,000 lots in MDR with this new regulation could be a 4-unit.
Right.
So 28% of our housing stock in theory. I don't know if you had frontage though as part of this. Did you, Isabel? Because that would be a lot harder in the GIS. Were you able to take into account?
No, I didn't take into account frontage with this.
Yeah. So it's probably quite a bit lower then.
Right.
I guess there's also like legislation at the state now that is specifically around this. And so it may or may not pass in the next 2 weeks. Like, so
What's that?
I'm also struggling because of that.
Do you know what that is?
Because it could like quadruple what we're talking about.
Yeah,
So I guess
give a-
I'm just really struggling with this conversation. Partially because we don't have all that lined up per se, like what are the limitations of the lot frontage on top of this? And it's gonna vary across this huge yellow area.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't feel like I have the information
Okay.
to try and make these decisions. And I feel like we could freak people out but like people should have input on this.
Yeah.
But without framing it around, you also need this or you need this.
Yep.
And without knowing what the state is gonna do, like, I don't feel like we have a picture of what this is gonna mean for Orono.
So can I ask a clarifying question about the point that you made earlier? Because I think I have the information that I was looking for on Judd's question, but I want to make sure that yours is also addressed. Are you really hoping, or do you have like differences in mind of neighborhoods that you want to take a deeper dive look at in terms of, because they are different from each other within the existing MDR context, other than Webster side and Sailor development, which we've already sort of parceled out as their own conversations? Are there other areas that we should be having those deeper dive conversations about, I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, I think we should have it about all of it because it's different. Like you've got areas that don't have sewer, you have areas that do have sewer, like, and so I think we need to talk about each of them. Like, and the development potential is very different in each of them.
So how do I ask this? Do you want to have more in-depth conversations about sort of, I'm just trying to like frame this conversation because when you start to look at each of the neighborhoods, they really are quite similar, right? So we have Sailor, we have Webster side, we have this sort of like, I don't know what to call it, College Heights area. And each neighborhood itself is quite similar. It's just these larger lots when you get out, especially onto like Kelly Road, Outer Main Street, that start to pose a different picture. But like when you look at each neighborhood itself, the sort of view of the street is quite similar just because of our historic development pattern. And it's all between 8 and about 15,000 square feet. 8 would be like Webster and Sailor.
For lot sizes.
Right.
But the sewer access, I think, varies though.
So sewer, it starts to end on Bennick Road. So it's like 20 parcels on Bennick Road. And then as you get out again towards those big parcels on Main Street and Kelly Road is where the sewer also ends.
The other thing is like the land trust properties are not mapped on here either, right?
The land trust properties are considered rural properties on the growth map. So they're the light green and they are mapped within this, yes. So the rural areas also include existing conserved land.
Yeah, not
So
in the yellow.
It sounds like the differing of the neighborhoods is sewer and water versus not sewer and water. If you think about, like you're saying, 20 houses on Benneck, so it goes like up noise, up in there, down through the Sailor subdivision or past that. Like on Main Street is the sewer and water. Does it go much further than that?
It really starts, it ends at Kelly Road.
Ends at Kelly Road, okay.
It's not on here. It's,
Yeah.
it's there.
I don't know whether to shut up or keep going.
No,
So,
last time Clint had brought up the topic of, again, perhaps like different MDRs, or MDR 1, MDR 2, and dividing up more so. Would that address some of your comments, Laura? I mean, is that sounds like what you're asking for, is that we could just consider just additional zoning in that large MDR area?
What do you mean additional zoning?
Kind of like an MDR 1 and MDR 2.
Differentiating.
Yeah, just
Different sections of the MDR.
Oh.
Yep.
I don't, maybe, or I don't know. I guess I think I've shared what my issues are. I feel like we don't have enough information from even what the town is saying in terms of the impacts, because there's other requirements. Like, it's not just about like the level of multifamily-ness. There's limitations past that. And then there's the no water in the sewer. And then there's like the very, very short-term potential for some state changes. And so like that leaves me and I missed last meeting. And this map is lacking. And so I'll just shut up with that. Like, I would recuse myself from any decisions based upon all of those things for the evening.
so my next question is, or I guess just to sort of reframe the conversation, and I don't know if this helps or answers your questions, but maybe just to reframe. You should think of this map not as a regulatory map, but as sort of visionary character areas. So visions for each of these areas, not necessarily, full, this is exactly how it's going to look. Well, we want to have a general idea of what it's going to look and feel like, but not into the level of the frontage should be exactly this and the minimum lot area should be exactly this, or what have you. We should be thinking of these areas as more illustrative of what we're hoping to see within these areas, because we need to do regulatory work in as we've mentioned, full ordinance rewrite after the comp plan is adopted. So what we really need to have general consensus on between ourselves and the public is what is the vision for these areas, and not necessarily into the level of should it be 5,000 square feet minimum lot or 10,000 or 20,000. I can respect if there needs to be additional information and we can have that conversation just so that I have a better idea of what I need to come back with, but just to sort of set the stage for the conversation, that's how I would consider this.
I guess, Phil, potentially, yes, like breaking it up, I think might be helpful. That could be one way to think about it. Like if we're talking about a vision for Orono, is it that broad brush all the same? Right now, I'm not comfortable saying that. But I don't know, like, that's just me.
Okay. What are other folks feeling like? Where are you at right now? I guess because if the goal of this meeting is to come out of something that we can present to the public or have me come back with more information, I think I need more either way.
What's the state rule? Is the state thing gonna change us?
Yeah, so there's sort of an additional zoning omnibus bill that is, let's call it 2003 2.0. So like a secondary version meant to clarify some of LD 2003, but also to significantly change things like definition of subdivision. So no longer being 3 units would have to come to planning board, like theoretically that could go to code enforcement officer, notwithstanding some other provisions. Additional clarification on ADUs and whether it is like per dwelling unit. Each unit gets an ADU or each lot gets an ADU. So clarifying that with, I think they're going towards each dwelling unit would get an ADU, but maybe I'm incorrect. I haven't seen this version in a while.
Yeah, Isabel, what if, I was thinking if we're gonna seek more public input, I think people would be, or feel more comfortable rather than just presenting worst case, like, oh, we're gonna put 4 units in your neighbor's house, if there were options so that, people can understand, what the options would be, like say you had three different options they could choose from and just, select what would be more appealing to them and, talk about the consequences for each of those options, what that would mean. And I would think that would generate discussion, rather than just perhaps maybe just settling on one, the four unit, for instance. But what are people's thoughts on that? If we seek public input, it would make sense to me that options would be well received, just as far as understanding what's out there. But what do others think?
I wonder if like mapping it out and showing what it would look like on a parcel, right? So I'm imagining my lot size, I can either fit a duplex or a duplex in a single family home if we lowered the density to what we were proposing. I think I have a bucket of road frontage too, right? So that's not an issue. But if we could map it out and show people like a large lot in a neighborhood and say, this is what it would look like in your neighborhood, so people could see if we are gonna go to public comment and give people some options to say, hey, it's not gonna be Judd's, 4 unit. It's not gonna look like that. So, if we just reduce the lot size, minimum lot size, but didn't allow for more than a duplex, what would that look like? What would that look like in my neighborhood? And if you do it in the, 3 or 4 of the major neighborhoods around town, or something visible that people recognize, you can say, hey, this house could look like this. And that gives people an idea so it doesn't feel as scary. Because when you say a big unit right next door to me, that sounds scarier than if you could actually visualize it, I think, in a way that seems a little more friendly.
The other thing is, if it's a growth area and you're on public sewer, right now, it's 4 units. It's not 2. And so this is being defined as the yellow is a limited growth area. Limited growth area, I don't think is a state term that can be a difference between year 2 or year 4.
So
I think it would be 4.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So, in a designated growth area, which would include limited growth, because there is no functional difference from the state's perspective, you're correct. It's only for a visionary exercise for the town. You are currently allowed up to 4 units. However, Orono did not go the route of capping at 4 units. Technically, on some of these lots, you'd be allowed any number of units as long as you can meet our minimum lot area requirement. But you have to meet the density requirements per unit. So, for example, if currently I have a lot that is
This is exactly the kind of issue that I feel like is not captured across this whole yellow area.
right.
Because those are important differences.
Yeah, at the same time, this is not a regulatory document. I want to understand the community's vision, and most people are not going to get down to the granular level that we frequently get into in this room. It's drafting, not necessarily for this visioning exercise of the comp plan.
So the real question is, do we want to drop the lot size so that something else can be done with it?
Right, and frankly, we don't even have to get to the point where we are recommending.
Yeah.
I recommended something for illustrative purposes. We don't even have to get to that level in the comp plan. We can simply say, we are recommending that the minimum lot area per dwelling unit be dropped or density be upped, whatever, however you want to frame it, to allow additional housing to be built within this area.
And I do agree with Jeff's point that, you know, we want to learn lessons from past mistakes. If that created quite a few issues in the past, we don't want to make the same mistakes that have been already looked at, but somehow come up with something creative to get more people in town. And we've talked about, you know, the building in the, you know, residential area, infill development, those kinds of things. So that, you know, we just have to explore what all those mechanisms are to get there. But I think a 4-unit house, and especially in the Webster neighborhood or wherever it would be, I think that would be a challenge for a lot of people. So I don't have all the answers here.
Doing anything with the light green areas?
So the light green areas are rural, so what we'd be looking to do would be to, on some level, disincentivize development, but what we talked about extensively was dropping, well, for Orono, actually, we're not fully disincentivizing development,
Yeah.
but that is attempted to do during the last comprehensive plan. What we've discussed extensively is dropping down the minimum lot area there from the current 3.67 to something more like 1 or 2 that would at least create a little bit more opportunity for development out in those areas. Critical natural areas are habitat areas
Right.
that really would not be able to be built on, barring like, you know, vernal SAMP program or some of these other like levers. But for the most part, the dark green is not built on. The light green is able to be built on with some caveats. And that's what's reflected in the narrative of the future land use chapter. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing, and obviously feel like if there's more information that's needed here before we present this to the public, please let me know because I need to come back with that. But I think what I'm hearing is that we're generally comfortable presenting the MDR recommendations to the public with the caveat that we need to have some framing and some context for people. And probably with the caveat that we'll be retaining our current requirements that you can't have more than a 2-unit building, any number of units, but they have to be, there's no more than a 2-unit building per our current use requirements.
With the state change, that could turn into a 4-unit.
No. The state change, well, it would be with an ADU, it would be
Right.
different, yeah.
So there'd be 2 accessory units, 2 units, so 4 units, so.
Yeah. Yep.
I like where this is going. We're buying some houses in Orono.
Also have space for, if you had a duplex on a half an acre, how much space do you really have for 2 rentable accessory dwelling units
And you
as
still
well?
need to meet setback requirements and all of that. I
Right.
think it would start to get pretty difficult.
Yeah.
I'm a worst case kind of guy. Glass is half full.
Relax. You should probably get away with it.
I really do think the state stuff needs to be, like, we either need to put a pin in this and see where it lands, or wait. That's the same thing. Just because it changes the minimum lot size, like it has a lot of impacts that like we collectively are not considering.
I think that I am happy to bring that back to like management. That one is like sort of above me, like waiting, like putting a pin in this. I can't control that piece, so I have to.
Oh, okay.
But I'm happy to have that conversation. Yeah.
Is it
Good
like,
point.
is it literally gonna be go for a vote in the next few weeks? Is that,
Yeah.
is the governor indicated that she's gonna sign it?
You know, I cannot divulge these things. I just.
You have connections, your husband knows.
That can. Oh my God.
So you could also make a decision to say, hey, barring this change, we might be okay with this. And then we're
Sure.
going to come public comment. We're not making a decision anyways.
Yep.
We're making a decision to propose something to the public.
At
It
the
just
same,
feels like it's a moot point to share something with the public that
could change,
could dramatically
Dramatically.
change.
Yeah.
Isabel-
And I just,
Oh, sorry, I just wanted for scheduling purposes, when would we propose that public meeting? I mean, how far out are we? If
we
the,
were having that public meeting on July 23rd.
Yeah.
that's plenty of time.
Okay,
that's what I was thinking, so.
so, yeah, I just want to be clear that like, you are totally correct. I understand that this is a dramatic change. We would have to talk about scheduling with the town manager and,
No, but
All
we'll
that,
know what, like in June.
okay, great.
And then it's just if we're trying to show like a scenario of it's 2 units or 4 units, like by saying it's a limited growth area, it might guarantee it being 4. So we're showing them a false option of it being 2.
Though, so,
Depending on the like, but we also need to layer in the other requirements that Orono has.
so
And
the
so,
other requirements that Orono has, and what I'm more concerned about at the state level is, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I have not seen a copy of this bill in about 2 weeks, and I know that it has changed. But there was conversation about dropping the minimum lot size to 5,000 square feet, which obviously that's much smaller than even our high density residential in Orono. So that's my more concern with this bill,
right, yeah.
is that
And that would
change that makes
override-
everything moot.
that would
Yeah,
over-
no, I know. Well, and that's why it's like, we need to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
Before we can.
That would override our local ordinance?
Yeah.
Like, so, but it would be, they'd say medium density must be 5,000.
They would say every lot area except rural has to be 5,000, like in growth areas, yeah.
So we could change our in-growth areas. That's how you combat that. But that gets to be a weird situation.
Yeah, it starts to get a interesting scenario. And
5,000 square feet.
yeah.
Small.
Going from nobody build my backyard to let's go. Love it.
So, I mean, I think you're bringing up a great point, and I will talk to management about this. Otherwise, are we like barring everything, basically, are we comfortable with like passing this on to the public for reaction in July? Like, is there anything else that we need to work out, we need to have conversations about, or are folks generally comfortable at this point?
As long as the information we present is clear to them, you know, what the options are, like I like Ashley's suggestion, you know, graphics, something them, you know, they need to be able to visualize what these changes are gonna mean to them for their residences, so you know, good visuals, a few options so they can understand that, and we can get a little bit more of a sense of what people are willing to put up with.
Just in terms of like, if we're gonna show them a map, we need to show the preserved areas. And ideally, the river would be blue as an orienting aspect of the map. And Forest Ave needs to be on there, particularly as it goes out even across 95.
Okay.
It's not clear to me like where this Orono West is, like, is that on both sides of Forest Ave or not, or?
Yeah, okay.
And how were the boundaries of Orono West defined? Is that current zoning?
It's actually, no, so that one we talked about that one a lot at our last meeting, so.
Okay.
But I will just, in brief, that one is existing property. Part of it is in the economic development zone, part of it is low density residential. But it's all property that's owned by one major property owner. And so it is, whether that person does something with it or they sell it all off, it is likely to be sold off as a chunk that has next to nothing on it right now. So sort of ripe for development potential.
And we talked about like novel development concepts the last time, Laura. It was just it's a parcel that has a lot of interesting possibilities if we did, you know, mixed use and a lot of different things there. Easy access. There were a lot of positives. It wasn't walkable, but you could create walkability within a potential development. So it was an intriguing option, but you know, that's the discussion we had last time. Jeff, you've been quiet for a while. Do you have any more thoughts on this?
I'm still mulling over the reaction you're gonna get when you.
That's what I was wondering, you know. Again, I think Dennis Cross could weigh in, people that have been here for a while. I haven't been here as long as you have, but not too far off. So.
I think we always have to keep in mind that the presence of the university totally distorts our real estate market in this community. It's not like other communities, and things happen here that wouldn't happen in other communities. They're not all good things.
A 4-unit house that's gonna house, you can't say students. 2 students ends up being 6 students with 8 cars.
Yeah,
And it gets
and
really,
those are the
then
things
it
that
gets
happen.
really congested.
Those are the things that happen unless you have the owner who is willing to lean on his tenants and not allow this stuff to happen. But that doesn't happen often enough in my observation.
So that comes back to a recommendation of perhaps that, you know, housing, the code officer that's dedicated to housing issues, that kind of thing. So he could hang out in Webster neighborhood over near where I live for quite a while, I think. Lots of work to do there.
I just want to clarify, because you had went back to the 4-unit conversation. I just want to clarify that I think where we landed was that we'll be recommending to the public retaining our current use requirements that doesn't allow as a use more than 2 units in a building. So if I have a large lot, I could still have, you know, 20 some odd units, but they would have to be split up
They can't be
in
attached.
duplexes or single family or a mix of the same. Because our current MDR zoning district does not allow multifamily units, so 3 or more, as a use, regardless of the number of units on the property.
So when we were looking at like similar communities, and I think we decided that maybe Dover, New Hampshire might be the closest.
Yep.
How do they deal, do we know how they deal with zoning density? You know, multi-units, things like that.
I think, so their context is also gonna be a little bit different than ours because we have these state laws now
Right.
that change things a little bit, and we are a much more rural campus, like in general.
Right.
Yeah, even compared to them, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you drive through Dover and it's not like a bunch of apartment buildings everywhere and students all around. So I'm wondering kind of what they're dealing with it. Again, I know there's no like, trying to think of an apples to apples community and.
You know, even the university's culture of like not living on campus after your first year, like really puts a difference in things, because that's not necessarily the case at like UNH or
It's not,
others,
no.
so.
I think in UNH, isn't the town in the middle of the university?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, like it's all one big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Generally comfortable with making the map changes and pushing this out for feedback, barring significant state.
By 3rd,
July 23rd would be our date, yeah.
okay. Are we gonna meet and talk before then?
I hadn't had anything on our schedule because we would typically be meeting the week of 4th of July. But if people want to meet like the 9th or the 9th would be the other time, we could probably figure something out.
I would feel like once we know more, we should meet and agree on a map and what we want to recommend, right?
Yeah, I mean, if that state law passes and it changes the density to 5,000, then that changes everything, I feel like.
We would have a much larger problem.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well, it doesn't have to be a problem, but it makes you think, it makes you want to break up potentially the huge yellow area. And
Yeah, I meant more of a problem for like my scope of work and our schedule unless policy.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, agreed.
Should we be thinking about the timing of doing this public? The last week of July strikes me as
Oh,
a lot of people are not,
nobody is not gonna care or
No.
not,
Let's
they're
come
not.
through.
Yeah.
That's what we
Said,
wanna
what was the
push it
date?
to.
I'll get you a ceiling fan.
Again, isn't
I
that
won't
based
be
off?
there that last week of July, not that it has to be on me, but I'm out of state.
Be perceived, I think, is that doing this when nobody can participate.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is
It's the
that
way
we're-
people think, right?
yeah.
We're just
Isn't it your
trying to-
contract schedule, Isabel? I mean, you're kind of had an agreement with council about what the schedule is gonna be, but I do agree with the points that end of July might not be great, but
Like, I didn't pick this date in a vacuum. I had talked to management around this date and
Yeah.
you get into August and it's back to school,
Right.
already.
Oh, we're always distracted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the
Like, I'm not gonna, I'm
Yeah.
gonna be out of town.
yeah.
So
I was supposed to be out of town too.
not that I'm important. I mean,
I think it's a valid point. I mean, we can have the conversation around like pushing this out until and not end of August, that's worse perhaps.
Well,
Yeah,
there's also like, is it July 23rd? There's a public meeting and then it's done? Or is it, we're releasing it July 15th and it's out there till August 15th for feedback?
yeah, I was actually hoping to have it released like far sooner than but there's the state issues that we need to consider. So, but yeah, I mean, my plan was to release it as soon as we could for feedback. And we also have online engagement that we're doing as part of this as well, that we're just waiting to roll out, so.
You can blame it on the state. It does feel untenable, like it feels like without knowing where that goes, we couldn't. And if we're not gonna meet again until
Well,
the
if they
23rd.
reduce minimum lot size to what would
Exactly.
be proposed, we're having a lot of different discussions real
Exactly.
fast.
Exactly.
Or an accessory unit per unit versus per
Right.
building.
Yep. Yep. Because if you can have one accessory unit per building on a
One accessory unit per unit, yeah.
On a
I like
tiny
where this is
lot,
going. I
on a
like where this is
tiny
going.
lot, yeah.
On a 5,000 square foot lot, oh
Yeah.
my God.
That's a
About- how about if we pencil in, again, wait to see what the decision is from the state level and we, just pencil in, maybe we have a meeting on the 9th, but if the state doesn't amend things like we, to the extremes, to 5,000 square feet, that we perhaps carry on, whether we have enough information from tonight that Isabel could present to a meeting. I don't know if you're comfortable with that, Laura. You mentioned that again, that you'd like to see maybe preview maps, those kinds of things. So my point is that, if we need to meet to review stuff prior to a meeting, that's fine. But I don't know what other people think about that, whether a meeting is necessary if the state doesn't make drastic changes. What would people like to do? Do you want a early July meeting, perhaps that week of the 9th or something like that?
It'd be like, if this passes, we have a meeting on this date, and if not, if it doesn't pass, we send out our recommendations as is.
That's what I was wondering, yeah.
Put it on the books now and then just cancel it if we need to. Everybody
Yep.
loves it
I
canceling.
think, again, just keep in mind alternatives. Laura, if Isabel's able to provide us just electronic copies in lieu of a meeting, I don't think anybody'd be really disappointed if we didn't have a early July meeting around the July 4th holiday. So perhaps if the state does not make the changes, we could review things just electronically and provide feedback prior to them being released. Would that work? Again, just in theory.
Fine. So we know everybody's looked at things.
Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the amendments to to the legislation.
What's the LD number?
Those 1829, they're not what's currently,
Yeah, it's not posted.
I know, but I sent around information and but I want to confirm it.
What's that?
The LD number?
1829.
I mean, I'm fine with her recommendation and Phil, that we have, schedule the meeting and we don't have it if this doesn't pass. The only question would be, how can we cancel that July 23rd public meeting? Like, if we don't find out if this passes until the end of June, you have to publicize how far ahead of time for July 23rd.
Ideally 30 days in advance.
So do we get to timing where now all of a sudden we need to cancel it because of the state?
Yes.
On
I mean, like the ideal situation, I'm not throwing like a party without inviting my friends 30 days in advance. So I like more than 30 days for a public meeting. But yeah, I know that this is sort of up in the air right now. So if we could, I'm happy to pencil in the July 9th meeting or online vote if needed. And then I think if we don't hear the results by June 30th, we should probably at least start advertising the July 23rd workshop.
Not able to pull it up. So
Pull out the water and sewer lines. Some of them are so old, they're gonna, decay anyway.
Yeah,
Interesting.
So if we wanted to have that July 8th, 9th meeting to review the documents that we're gonna share, we could do that too. Like if you sent them out electronically and we felt like, oh gee, we really need to meet on these and talk more, we could flex that meeting into that also, right?
Yeah, that's my second question is sort of what are you anticipating that you'll have to review other than the map changes that we've discussed?
I thought you were gonna do some scenarios of what it would look like for different neighborhoods. Or
Okay,
what,
so you actually review like a full presentation,
I-
post all the.
I guess that's what I heard. I do have an opinion. I think that if we just say 4 units in a people are gonna freak out. But if we can say, hey, we've thought this through and we think in this general neighborhood, it would look like, this, or in this part of the MDR, it would look like that, people would be more comfortable and have a more informed ability to react.
Yeah.
but you can't guarantee what it's gonna look like.
But in some neighborhoods, or well, maybe not neighborhoods, but like a frontage scenario, or like lot scenarios where, because it sounds like there's the things that are the added on factors also have to be part of the conversation, right? Like you can have 4 units, but they can only be 2 buildings. And you have to have 400 feet of road frontage or whatever that is. I don't know what all that stuff is, but that gives people a better picture of what scenarios we're thinking of.
Right, I was hoping that we could do that electronically. So, again, if drastic changes from the state level, I think then we definitely have to have a meeting, but I would think Isabel could present us some concepts or just something that's gonna go out to the public so that we could review that online, people could participate in lieu of a meeting in person in early July.
So is the question for the public? What's the question for the public? Because just asking for feedback isn't, like, it feels like we do need to chunk the area. There's a lot going on in that yellow area to just ask for feedback on.
Yeah, so I want to be very clear that this is a future land use workshop that was outlined in my scope of work from the outset. it's actually not just focused on the MDR neighborhood itself, it's focused on every neighborhood. And so it's an opportunity to present the data, present our vision statement and why we've come up with this future land use map and narrative recommendations the way that we have. And then also present scenarios, not just for the MDR neighborhood, but for each of the neighborhoods, and ask for some specific and targeted feedback that we still need related to those neighborhoods. So, in the rural area, what I'm really I have some specific questions that I need to better understand to come up with some more targeted recommendations for ordinance amendments. So it's not just focused on the MDR and getting feedback specific to the MDR. It's actually how it,
That's where the bulk of our residents live.
yeah, and so it sort of naturally lends itself to that being that way, but actually we're going to, what I typically do in other communities and what I'm sort of envisioning is that we're having some neighborhood stations around the room. So this is a little bit less me providing a whole presentation, but perhaps me just providing a brief overview and then having neighborhood stations around the room where people can provide feedback on visuals for the MDR or on specific questions that I need answered for the rural areas or on, targeted questions and visuals. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, small groups is good, because then you get people interacting much more than if you have people in a big group.
Yeah.
People are less likely to
And
chime in.
And the benefit here too is, some people go to every station and that's great. Some people go to their neighborhood and they stay at their neighborhood and they have some pretty targeted conversations and discussion, and that's also fine. It's sort of a choose your own adventure and we get some good feedback that way, so.
Right, we're just at a point where we need more public input, and again, that's why the workshop is scheduled, but I'm not sure that we need a July meeting to review Isabel's graphics. I think we can do that online, but by email.
Except if there's a state law change, then we will meet, or still no.
That's what I was thinking, just pencil in a date. If the state changes go through, then we have, as we said, we have a lot more to discuss. But if not, and we're just proceeding as is, then I think the material that she wants to present, or, just the graphics and scenarios, that she can run it by us by email, and we can all comment that way in lieu of a meeting. But that's my opinion. But
I just want to note that should this state law pass, it is sort of a broader conversation, because at that point we're sort of throwing out the last 2 to 3 months of my work on the future land use chapter and restarting.
Right.
So it's less of a conversation that I'll be ready to share something at July 9th, and more I'm coming prepared to share next steps and revised scope of work. So
yeah, so why don't we just save that date, and if people are okay with that, just by email we can comment. If that doesn't go through, let's just review our material and everybody can comment electronically. Are people okay with that?
okay.
Nice.
Yes.
Great. Isabel, do you want to talk about just go into a little more detail on the future land use plan and the packet you provided?
So this is just the changes. It reflects the changes that we made at our last meeting. There weren't substantive changes. I don't want to say substantive. There were some changes made at the last meeting, but this is just the most recent draft that I provided. So it's really just so you're aware of what the most recent draft is, based on our conversation back in May. Yep. I don't know if we want to do this, and I'll turn to you, Mr. Chair, but we did have a remainder of the plan audit that I was hoping to go through, just so that I can start that next step of crafting goals and policies and having a better understanding of where we are.
People okay with jumping into that a little bit? Or back into that, yeah.
I can share the. Okay, so we had left off previously on land use, so I think that's a good, also pertinent to our conversation this evening. What we had been doing, just as a refresher, was really focusing on the goals and objectives and understanding their continued relevance. So we were going through this and discussing if things need to be reworked, reworded slightly, or if things were no longer relevant, or if things continue to be relevant and should be reflected in this next plan. So the goal related to land use was, it matched the state goal, and it was to encourage orderly growth and development in appropriate areas of each community and region while protecting the state's rural character, making efficient use of public services, and preventing development sprawl.
So that's the state goal, not the local goal?
Our local goal matched the state goal at the last time of the last plan, yeah.
How can our local goal talk about communities and regions while the state's, I'm confused.
They just mirrored the state's, they didn't come up with their own local goal, it sounds like.
Okay.
Yep.
So we need to come up with a local goal?
Well, I
or
guess that's
say
what I'm
this
asking is this still sort of the goal, or is there a different local goal that we should be having conversations about? To me, I think it's my recommendation that this captures well the conversations we've had. Clearly, there's some rewording that needs to be done, but to me, this captures the conversations that we've been having throughout this process as well.
We'd change it to be relevant to a town as opposed to a state.
Yeah, say, you could just change each to our, or the community of Orono.
Okay.
Protecting the town's rural character. Yeah,
Rural character, is that what we're protecting?
I
No.
No.
we were talking about that a minute
In
ago.
the town, that's rural and protected.
Isabel, do you have similar local goals in your other communities you work with? Something that you could actually reword?
I guess what I'm really asking about here is like the philosophical questions. So it's some saying that we're not looking to necessarily protect rural character as our big goal. So is it to encourage growth and development consistent with our known needs and desires while protecting our rural character, et cetera, et cetera?
Or our neighborhood character or something, even though
Yeah,
character is.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe Orono as a rural character. I know in like context of the country, but like in our state, we're a town, I think a small town or medium-sized town or something like that.
We are rural, right? Technically.
Yeah.
Rural, for a rural community.
Yeah.
But we're not better either.
Right. This is certainly my definition of rural, not still like where I grew up, but
While protecting I think in general, I don't like,
Areas
what was that?
or natural area.
Natural, yeah. So I was gonna drill down a little bit, but that I think reflects it, natural areas.
But it's also, we want it to be a town as opposed to like, it's not just our natural areas. We want to protect the character of what Orono is. And I guess some people, I know it is technically rural. I mean, from a definition, but it's not the rurality that we're necessarily protecting. It's the feel of a town, in my opinion.
Is that kind of the downtown area that you're describing, like maintaining that kind of walkable restaurant, bar?
I just think everything of the community is like, that's what we really pride ourselves in Orono, is being, having good schools and having a good library and being a good place to live. And for some people that means living in the very downtowny areas. For some people it means living in the more, rural areas of town. but I think it's the character of the town that we seek to preserve. And our natural, I'm not saying not our natural resources, that too.
Okay, so I will tell you from a philosophical perspective, I hate the word character because it doesn't tell
Yeah.
me what you're trying to preserve. So if we could I think what you said was, living close to our amenities, walkability. Some of it is the downtown, like the design of the buildings in our downtown to some extent.
Does community get to character for Orono, right? Because that's certainly why we're here. My family is for the community, right?
But if you qualified character in terms of like, we're an education and enrichment community where those are kind of, think about what we're willing to invest our time and energy and what we're the home of.
This is about land use though. So
Yeah,
isn't what we have good, but we add on the making efficient use of public services and preventing development sprawl? Like, isn't that
To
or
encourage, yeah.
removing the preventing development sprawl? Because I guess that's the land use. Yeah, okay.
So to encourage growth and development of our village area while protecting our natural areas.
And making efficient
Yes.
use of public,
Yeah.
which means walkability.
Yep.
In effect, really.
Uh,
Great. And you threw the word village in there. I like the village. That's fancy.
And we can just remove prevent development.
Medieval time, village.
The objective was the town will review and revise the land use ordinance as necessary to assure that it's using the appropriate review tools for different kinds of proposals and to streamline the review process both for the applicant and the town. I think this is still a worthwhile objective. And when you look at the strategies underneath, some of the specific recommendations weren't done, but in general, this objective is also important because we're trying to make the process itself easier and more efficient to incentivize development.
Okay.
Okay.
Was that in the old one?
Yeah,
I don't think we
Yeah.
did a great job.
yeah, both are completed.
Yeah. I noticed that when I went through it.
The next objective is the town will correct or resolve ambiguities and inconsistencies in the land use ordinance. When I looked at this earlier, I think this is still relevant, but I also think it needs to address issues with like a lack of modern technologies and modern uses not being included and therefore not allowed in our zoning ordinance. So addressing
You told us before, Isabel, that our ordinances need an awful lot of work, so. I mean, clearly that objective still stands, but however you need to tweak it to make sure our ordinances are up to snuff, that would be good.
town
2
will
down, 28 to go, so.
Yeah,
Town will establish a building height standard that allows for efficient development use of space. This was not necessarily completed, but is the building height really still the relevant thing here?
I don't even remember why we added that in there. We have that, is it 39 feet? Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's
35, maybe it's 39, I was remembering 35.
You don't want,
35 is what I remember.
a skyscraper in the middle of town.
Well, since that happened.
Yeah. So 2 stories, because that's another thing that could change.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point with this relevance is like, is the building height the biggest issue? Like, it might still be an issue, but I don't think it rises to like objective level of issue.
Right, because this is a
Right.
guiding document, right?
Yeah.
So it's not policy, it's suggestions and.
I mean, I will say that it depends what we want, but if we are looking for more development, like our office building, this was a pain in the ass.
Mm.
That you couldn't go up.
That's right. It was like a thing. It's like, oh no, The
Oh,
architects, they're like, oh, no, no.
Huge
Way
thing.
more expensive to
And
go
it-
out than up.
Exactly, and it had
Yeah.
to alter the roof and everything, and
Yep,
it was, the cost.
There's a public safety element to this, though. You could
That's right, yeah. That was,
create a situation where the town has to run out and buy a $10 million fire engine, ladder truck or something in order to keep their insurance
Yes.
situation.
I remember that now. It was related to the ladder truck, the extension that they could get to. Yeah.
Is it really, like, we don't have a ladder truck?
No, we have a
Well, we have one, but the
Only
building
39.
height was related to that, how far that ladder can extend, and I remember that discussion, not every bit of it, but that's part of what we talked about last time.
More,
My point-
the higher you go up, the bigger ladder truck you need.
Correct.
I
So
guess,
as Jeff said, I don't know that we're willing to invest in a really expensive new piece of fire safety equipment. But
I guess my point here is we could probably keep the strategies, but not like. It's not, you should think of your objectives as some of your major priorities related to land use. I don't know that this is a major priority. It may still be relevant, but not a priority. So we could keep the actions that haven't been completed, but remove the objective.
Okay.
Town will amend the land use ordinance to increase opportunities for affordable home ownership, close to services, jobs, and downtown while protecting the character of existing neighborhoods. Keep or
Yeah,
Okay.
we can.
Okay. Sorry, I just have to.
Through June 18th.
Town will amend the land use ordinance to encourage home occupations as an important part of Orono's economic base and lifestyle.
Looks like we accomplished it, according
And
to your little.
yeah,
going back to this, I don't know that this rises to the level of a priority anymore because we've done a lot of the work around streamlining the process.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
What?
Well, I guess I've heard that it's not necessarily easy to do that.
To do what?
But I'm curious what the action was there, what
So
was
it's
done.
I can't read it.
Yeah,
It was to amend the land use ordinance that allow home occupations that don't involve like routine customer traffic or routine deliveries with a simple registration to the code enforcement office. Other home occupations that like require, like you have customers that come to your house still
Okay.
require planning board review, but it is a much simpler process at this point.
it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's easy peasy.
Yeah, we tried to streamline it so the planning board, I mean, we were just seeing, every little home occupation, and that just wasn't necessary. So they created categories of different home businesses, and it seems to have addressed the issues. At least it made planning board easier, but
Next one was the town will expand the clustered development option in designated growth areas to accommodate residential development while incorporating preserved open space.
Why is that only in designated growth areas?
Also, I think we talked a little bit about preserved open space too.
Yeah, so this one is a little bit,
It doesn't have to incorporate it, right? As
well,
part of the conversation.
that, yes, our conversation was around potentially in the growth areas, removing the requirement to incorporate open space and just simply allowing clustered development provisions.
You're trying to push the high density in the growth area.
Well, I guess I was thinking about, if you're abutting an already preserved piece of land, do you also need to include? That's kind of what I was thinking, like, if you're backed up against an Orono land trust property and you want to put a little cluster development in, and you still need to preserve open space in that cluster, just seems a little bit unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like, we have a lot of preserved land in Orono. Can we leverage, you know, like, and a lot of that land is walkable to downtown.
Yeah, I would
Yeah, I
love to
think
get.
Shadbush Lane was an example of that. I think they clustered, didn't they? Judd, do you recall that? Didn't they
Which one?
cluster that? The dip in Forest Ave across from that mobile home park.
Shadbush,
Yeah, Shadbush Lane. So
Yeah,
that's cluster?
I'm just trying to remember, did we cluster that, or is that regular lot size?
That,
Land
There's
has a
small lots
preserved
in there.
area.
Shadbush.
That's cluster.
I was thinking it was cluster, and then they had to preserve open space. Vernal Pools also shot down extra lots in that project as well, but there's quite a bit of open space reserved, so that must be for clustering, I would assume.
Do a cluster with the open space requirements, especially where we have so much preserved. I'd love to just toss it out. Yeah.
Okay. I think the objective is probably not relevant anymore, with caveats that we probably need to address our cluster development provisions and clean them up.
That probably makes.
And more as an
sense.
action than a
Yeah.
objective. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Laura, just for reference, we did talk about that last time, so we addressed in the rural area because comments from Dennis Cross, and I think Judd, you probably weighed in too. It's just the economics just didn't work with the cluster incentives out in the F&A zone, so that we did kind of address that last time. So I think cluster, as you said, Isabel, clustering needs to be addressed in probably all of our areas. So
What were you gonna say?
Evan Reichert was from Southern Maine. So he was very insistent that we had an open space requirement in the developments because it was disappearing in Southern Maine and he didn't want it to disappear here. But I don't think it's going to.
Yeah, no risk of that here.
Provision was in the FNA zone.
And that, I mean, on some level, that probably still makes sense in the F&A
Yeah,
zone.
it does make sense.
Yeah,
yes,
maybe not. I forget the requirement. The percentage was quite high, which was Dennis's point last time.
Yeah.
Right.
But it still probably makes sense out there, and then cleaning up its requirements in the growth area to actually
Yeah.
incentivize it.
Yep.
So the next objective was the town will amend the land use ordinance to create flexibility in the use and reuse of properties in the medium density residential district along Main Street and consider a flexible zoning approach for large residential or institutional properties on College Avenue.
Was done, I think. wasn't it?
Yeah, the actions related to this were the Main Street overlay options and some of rezoning sections of College Avenue. Yeah,
I don't think these are that pertinent anymore. We discussed whenever it was a few months ago. I don't know about anyone else, but houses they look good. That's all we care about. This isn't recorded, right? This isn't public?
It is.
all your slumlord comments, Judd. You know, you're gonna create another Potterville or something like that. I don't know.
Share it on Facebook when it comes out.
No, you did. Actually find me, but.
This is an example though, like, and I get that it's in the Webster thing, but like there are areas within our yellow, like when we're talking about the College Avenue,
yep.
like there are sections that I feel like within MDR need to be thought about differently than like this entire yellow area. And like, I think of the College Avenue as one, and then Park Street. And I guess like I would look at this, the land that is on Park Street, like the lots on Park Street are different than like the rest of the Webster neighborhood. So like that, like the houses that you're driving along across from Dryden Park, it feels like those should be thought about differently than like the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily see a reason why we couldn't think of those differently through like a zoning amendment process. The boundary lines here are not following like parcel, well, they're loosely following parcel boundary lines, but they don't have to follow parcel boundary lines. They are sort of guiding documents. The last comp plan, in fact, just sort of had like a circle as the growth area.
Mhm.
And we could go back to doing something more to that. I think this approach with character areas and visions for those like general broad areas makes more sense than that approach.
Agree.
But, and they don't have to be like firm boundary lines. But if there's like a whole piece, you know, maybe you're saying College Ave and Park Street, there's a whole piece that really just needs to be thought about completely differently than anything we have right now.
I guess
Conversation.
I would call out Park Street as like these little corridors were called out.
Mhm.
Because I think it's worth some attention. And it's an odd dynamic with the single family, like well, they're not single family. The properties on one side is, and then you've got Dryden Terrace on the other. Like and there's a lot of traffic, like, but it's very walkable. Like, I think that could be a little focus area, just as Main Street was 10 years ago. And there's some opportunity for change
Okay.
there too, I would say.
Yeah, I consider Dryden Terrace as sort of an extension, as well as the new office building, sort of an extension of downtown. Going back to our original conversations around sort of creating higher density housing and offices within walking distance of downtown.
I'm thinking of like across the street,
Okay.
like,
Dryden Terrace, and funny enough, is much better looking and more well kept than the houses across the street, which are all rented single family homes, generally speaking, I think.
which I guess is what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
I would call that area out for some
Mhm.
Yeah, and as you get past Dryden, it's because I've walked.
land use reassessment to encourage something potentially different to go on there, but just that corridor.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can see that Park Street being a corporate extension. I mean, that's what all these larger universities are doing now, where there's essentially a business park right next to the university.
Yeah.
Students can just roll off of into these corporate buildings. You haven't seen these?
That was not gonna be what I was gonna share for a vision. But that's just me.
Love more businesses in town though, so
Yeah, I mean, that's.
Yeah.
you wanna build it, knock yourself out.
This ties in with our previous objective, which was around amending the standards of the existing C2 district, which is sort of right next to where you're talking about. So it's like
It's up the
Webster
road.
and then right there.
Yeah.
To be more consistent with the purpose of a mixed-use walkable district. Now, I will say, many of the design standards for a walkable district were adopted, and then we didn't actually marry the allowed land uses in the area with a mixed-use walkable district. So I think there is opportunities for some more visioning in that area.
Commercial?
And Starbucks just went in, you've got all
I mean,
the
that's
speed place.
that's the kind of thing where you get community input on.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
and
I
that's,
think people would have ideas for what they want that corridor to look like,
yep.
other than what's potentially there.
Does the university own all that land next to the roundabout, the park,
Street's gonna
be
be
very
very different.
they
The
do,
other side,
yeah, across from,
I assume so, once you go in.
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
To the left.
Yep.
But a lot of it's wetlands, I think, it's,
What do you?
I don't know how
I
usable all that.
I don't think it is. I think it's
But how is that
fertile.
gonna change
Isn't it?
Park Street?
That's why it's always covered in deer,
Covered with deer.
always covered in deer. You go like first thing in the morning, like right from the sunset, it's covered in deer.
Yeah,
They have bees back there too, at the back of those.
any.
Yes.
Those pilots could have two.
Always more bees.
People. There'd be a lot more people downtown.
Okay, so
Yes. Yeah, which is great.
Yes, it is. great.
Yeah.
there was conversation at the last comp plan, I guess, around assuring that appropriate areas of Orono are zoned for light industry, for example, production, storage, and distribution. I think that is still a relevant objective for certain areas, but we've tried to define those a little bit more in the future land use section.
So do we need to keep that in there if it's been done?
I think we need a similar objective, but it's going to be more specific. Would be
Okay.
my recommendation.
I want the industrial type.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bring them on.
So Isabel, we're at 10 of 8. I don't know where a good break point is. I just wanted to let you know. So we'll be cutting out at 8 this evening.
For objectives for land use, if we could finish land use, I would call that a win.
Yeah.
Okay.
Visible win.
Let's give Isabel a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And get
That's my goal. Give Isabel a-
winner.
The town will assure the ability for Orono downtown to grow in a compact, walkable manner, building on its village architecture and character.
I like that word character. I'm kidding. Here.
Can you,
You've got a couple of objectives that under that weren't completed, it looks like too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that this is still a relevant objective and sort of goes back to some of the expansion of the downtown character area in the map that I've proposed. So
100%. We've got a couple of large empty buildings downtown that would seem like they'd be prime locations for things.
Something.
Right.
Vacancy tax.
Is that a thing?
it is a
It is a
thing.
thing.
That's
Yeah.
nice.
I'm all for it.
Oh,
Same.
For
Figure it out.
there.
Vacancy tax, that's a council issue.
Yeah, but you know, you time limit it, right? Like, oh, if it's been a certain amount of time.
in a nice way.
This way.
They can't get to rent the property and then you're gonna tax them because they can't get.
Peace.
Come on, we're gonna
It
help.
was a nice place. They probably.
They can
rented
sell it if they
Exactly.
don't like the vacancy tax.
I mean, if
That's
it's a
the
month,
point.
maybe you don't
Like,
tax it,
it
but if it's 6
encourages
20
using-
years of leaving a building open is not doing our town any good. For 10
Right.
years or whatever, it's been a lot, some of them.
All right,
Um,
let's stick to task. Get here, finish up.
I mean, is this rising to the level of an objective of visitor economy by allowing a variety of lodging opportunities in appropriate zoning districts?
No,
Oh,
we get plenty of visitors. Well, do
Don't
we-
have
What are the
to-
what are the lodging opportunities? in-
It's literally just the one on Godfrey and the new one on campus.
We don't have,
basically.
we don't have a visitor.
We
there's
don't,
the Airbnbs too.
so,
I like
Yeah.
That was, I think the impetus for this is to, when Airbnb, I think about 10, 12 years or whenever it was, when we were having these discussions before, Airbnbs were just becoming a lot more popular. So I think that was the intent of this back when, so. Just
There still
open
aren't,
Airbnbs,
there still aren't even many of
Horrible idea.
those. So we have no legislation prohibiting them, not really, right? And
You
we
have to
have,
go to planning board.
right, and we have almost none
Nobody
of
does.
them. Yep.
yeah, that was not what I was thinking of. It would be like whether a bed and
Hotels.
breakfast or a hotel or something would make sense.
Yeah, so they amended the zoning ordinance to include homestays, which are Airbnbs. Technically, people that run full home Airbnbs are supposed to come to planning board. I don't know how many of them actually do, but to your point, the AirDNA data is showing that we don't have very many in general. So,
Yeah, there's very few.
yeah.
If you wanted to get an Airbnb in town, it's almost impossible.
Mm.
So,
And the ones that we do have, almost all of those do 1 month stay minimums for traveling nurses. So what we do have in town is not what you would think of.
but they did include bed and breakfast, hotels, motels as like allowable land uses, which I am assuming it wasn't before based on the wording of this, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So no longer relevant, or at least no longer rising to the level of priority, maybe?
I mean, it's kind of worse because there's one less hotel.
Yeah.
Not that it was a nice.
Thanks, Judd.
Yeah.
That was my
Like,
parents' favorite hotel in Maine to stay at, so they still talk about it. So, it wasn't a great hotel, but it served its purpose.
yeah, people have stayed there.
Ursa?
Yeah,
It's so nice.
we put people up there and they've complained. They've like, it's not nice. They want to go stay at the Garden Inn or the Marriott in Bangor. They're like, it's not nice. Maybe it's. This is recorded? Damn it.
I've heard good things about the Ursa.
What, you said you like it?
It's a good thing you have a big building, Judd.
So do we think that's still potentially relevant, Isabel? Is that what we're saying?
I think that's landing,
Just
but maybe.
not at the top of the heap, but okay.
I'm removing it too. I'm just loud.
I think it's fine to keep it.
All right.
And the town will allow, okay. The town will align its economic development zone district to take advantage of trends towards mixed-use business campuses.
I would
I-
get rid of that.
Yeah, I don't think this is as relevant as it was at the time, and some of the case studies that we've included in the future land use draft, I think maybe better get at this than some of the things that were adopted in 2016.
And we're getting rid of like the action steps with it too, right?
Yeah.
That are green. Yeah, okay.
Okay. I think that's a good spot for us to end. It would be going on to the next category, so I'm happy to end here for the
Did it
evening.
win?
Nice. You get a win. Good.
One place.
All right. So Isabel, you're gonna send out materials prior to, well, I mean, we have the month of June, but prior to any July 9th meeting. You're gonna give us an update on the state happenings, so we are aware of that. And then just give us ample time to review any material. If the state doesn't do anything, you can give us time to review and comment on what you're gonna send us.
Yeah, I will say if this is adopted in June, we likely will not be doing a formal meeting in July. It would be me giving an update around how we're amending the scope, so.
Okay.
There's no place to buy toilet paper.
Is it
Yeah.
July 8th or July 9th?
Nine.
I want to be able to go there to, like, it would be great to be able to buy that stuff within.
All right, so just looking out a little bit, Isabel, so we have potentially July 9th, or just again feedback, or we're in person depending on what happens. July 23rd you mentioned, and looking ahead, what's beyond that? If you could just update me.
I would likely be having a meeting in August, date to be determined, and we would actually start going through and prioritizing goals and objectives.
Yep.
And then I would come back in September with actions, and then in October, we would be looking at a finalized document pending changes. Pending changes.
Yeah.
Pending changes as discussed this evening.
Very good. We still don't have any public comment, right? Nobody's there.
No.
Okay. We good to go?
Judd, video.
Are we gonna, how do we end oh, we can't. Okay,
Judd gone wild.
How do we end the what?
we a public, can we sit and talk for a minute or no? If the public meeting ends.
Yeah, we would need to adjourn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Do
Yeah, we're not really doing any motions, but if we're good to go, I think that wraps it up, doesn't it? All right, Isabel, yeah, we'll hear from you online. Just keep us posted on what's going on and keep on chugging. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your input.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank
See ya.